There was something unnatural about the silence, not the respectful kind that settles over a room before a formal proceeding. No, this was the kind that felt tense, like a breath being held by 1,000 invisible lungs. It was 9:54 a.m. The hearing room inside the Dirksen Senate office building was already full, staffers lining the walls, media scrambling for the best angles, assistants adjusting microphones, some glancing nervously toward the double doors. Senator Chris Murphy sat alone at the horseshoe-shaped table reserved for the leading questioners, his hands clasped tightly together, a folder of documents untouched before him. He wasn't looking at the door, but everyone else was. Outside, the world was watching. Cable news had gone to full split-screen coverage. On the left, live shots of the Senate hearing room. On the right, a black Tesla pulling up to the curb. "Mr. Elon Musk has arrived," the anchor's voice crackled through phones in the press section. "He's here to testify under oath before the Senate Subcommittee on Youth Mental Health and Digital Responsibility." The phrase itself sounded ironic to some. Elon Musk and responsibility in the same sentence. But to others, it was exactly why they tuned in. On one side, Chris Murphy, the Democratic senator from Connecticut, known for his calm voice and fierce advocacy for gun control, mental health reform, and protecting America's youth. On the other side, Elon Musk, CEO of SpaceX, Tesla, and the man who had ripped the Twitter bird out of the sky and replaced it with a letter, an unpredictable force with more influence than most governments. This wasn't left versus right. It wasn't even tech versus government. It was control versus freedom, and no one knew which side would flinch first. Musk walked in through the double doors alone. No entourage, no attorneys, no handlers. Just a man in a plain black blazer, a bottle of water, and a thick manila envelope under his arm. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He barely even glanced at the cameras. He sat at the witness table like a man walking into a chess game where half the pieces had already been moved without him. Cameras clicked. A reporter whispered into his mic. A staffer adjusted the gain on her audio feed. Chris Murphy finally looked up. He didn't nod, didn't smile, just studied him. Quietly. Almost like he was trying to find the weakness before the first question landed. The chairman entered and banged the gavel. "This hearing will now come to order." The room quieted, if it could get any quieter. Phones flipped to silent. Keyboards went still. Murphy opened his folder, slowly. Inside were charts, psychological studies, screenshots, reports from pediatricians, school counselors, mental health researchers, all saying the same thing. Depression, anxiety, suicide, and one word on every page: social media. He glanced up again at Elon Musk, who sat still, his fingers folded, his face unreadable. This wasn't going to be a warm exchange. It was going to be surgery. Musk cleared his throat. "I'm here," he said into the mic, "because I believe in truth. And truth by nature is rarely safe, but it's always necessary." It was a short line, but like a fuse, it didn't need to be long to reach the powder. Chris Murphy closed the folder and looked him dead in the eye. "Then let's begin." Senator Murphy didn't waste time. He leaned forward slightly, fingers interlocked, voice steady. "Mr. Musk," he began, "you've said, repeatedly, that X is a place for open dialogue, a place where people can think out loud. But what we're seeing isn't harmless thinking. It's harmful spiraling." A pause, a breath, then, "We have kids, 12, 13 years old, staying up until 3 a.m., reading conspiracy threads about vaccines and school shootings. We have teenage girls developing eating disorders from algorithmically recommended content. We have young men joining extremist channels because they think it makes them feel seen." Murphy opened the folder now. A deliberate gesture. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, self-harm rates among teenage girls have nearly tripled in the past decade, a decade that overlaps almost perfectly with the rise of algorithm-driven social platforms. He looked up again. "Explain to me how that's freedom." For a moment, Musk didn't speak. He tapped a single finger once on the table, not nervously, deliberately. Then he leaned into the mic. I appreciate the gravity of what you're saying, Senator. I do. But I think we're asking the wrong question. Murphy raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what's the right one? It's the... Musk's voice was calm, not defensive, not sharp, just deliberate. The right question, he said, isn't whether people say dangerous things online. It's whether suppressing those things makes the danger go away, or makes it worse. The silence returned, colder this time. I've read those same reports, Musk continued, and I've also read the ones that show depression and anxiety correlating with isolation, censorship, and lack of autonomy. He folded his hands. You're blaming speech. I'm blaming suppression. Murphy didn't flinch. So the solution, he said slowly, is to remove every guardrail and let 13-year-olds get radicalized in real time. Musk looked at him for a long second. No, he said. The solution is to teach them to think, not tell them what to think. Across the room, a CNN camera operator slightly adjusted his angle. The reporters in the back weren't typing anymore. They were listening. Murphy leaned back in his chair, not retreating, recalculating. You talk like a philosopher, he said. But you run a machine, an algorithm, a system built to profit from outrage. He slid a printed chart across the table, facing Musk. This is a breakdown of engagement spikes on X. Every single spike aligns with the spread of a hoax, a political scandal, or a violent trend. Murphy tilted his head. Your system doesn't reward thought, Mr. Musk. It rewards noise. Elon didn't even glance at the paper. I've adjusted the algorithm more times than I can count, he replied. But no code can fix what culture won't face. He looked directly at Murphy. You can program suppression. You can't program wisdom. That landed, not like a punch, but like a line of poetry someone wishes they had said first. Murphy didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. What happens, he asked softly, when truth isn't convenient anymore? When it hurts people? Musk's answer was even softer. Then it's probably the most important time to say it. A few senators glanced around the room. The hearing was no longer a performance. It had become something else, a philosophical fight in the skin of policy. Outside, X, was already exploding. Murphy vs. Musk, truth under oath, speak or suppress. But inside, neither man seemed to notice. They weren't talking to cameras anymore. They were talking to each other. Chris Murphy didn't like half answers, especially not in his committee, so he didn't wait for the air to settle. Let me ask you directly, Mr. Musk, he said, leaning forward now. Do you believe your platform is contributing to the mental health crisis among America's youth? It wasn't rhetorical. It was a spear aimed at the center. Musk didn't blink. I believe, he said, that blaming a platform for society's pain is like blaming the mirror for what you see in it. Murphy's expression didn't change, but the temperature did. So you take no responsibility. Musk tilted his head slightly. I take responsibility for building a space where people can speak. I do not take responsibility for a culture that refuses to listen. There it was, the shift. Musk wasn't answering anymore. He was pressing back. Murphy narrowed his eyes. He wasn't surprised, but he wasn't amused either. You've created an ecosystem, Murphy said, where hate speech, disinformation, and performative cruelty thrive. And now you're calling that a mirror? Musk's voice was calm. I'm saying you can't fix a reflection by breaking the glass. A low murmur passed through the chamber. One of Murphy's aides handed him a new sheet. It was a printout of a trending thread that had gone viral the previous week. An AI-generated fake news story that had gotten over 10 million impressions on X. This, Murphy said, holding it up, got more reach on your platform than any verified article that refuted it. That's not a mirror. That's a megaphone with no filter. Musk glanced at the paper, then at Murphy. Senator, people don't trust filtered information anymore. Not after what they've seen. When you regulate the conversation, people don't stop talking. They just stop trusting. A beat passed. Murphy leaned back slowly. You keep calling it conversation, but this isn't a fireside chat. It's a battlefield. Musk nodded once. Yes. And the moment we pretend it's anything else, we lose the fight for truth entirely. Outside the chamber, those watching from phones and screens leaned in closer. Because now, it didn't sound like a tech hearing. It sounded like a crossroads. Two men, two worldviews, and no common ground in sight. Murphy didn't hold back this time. You talk about trust like it's some philosophical luxury, but kids are dying, Mr. Musk. From lies, from hate, from platforms like yours. No more metaphors, just fire. Musk sat still. Pain doesn't disappear when you silence it. It just moves underground, he said. You want clean discourse, but the world isn't clean, Senator. Murphy snapped back. And yet you profit from that chaos. Musk met his eyes. I didn't build chaos. I built a window. What people see through it, that's on them. The room stiffened. Murphy's voice dropped low, sharper now. So when white supremacists trend, when hoaxes go viral, when tragedy becomes entertainment, that's just a reflection? Musk didn't blink. It's ugly, yes, but it's real. And if we stop showing the real, what's left? There was a beat. No one typed. No one whispered. Because somewhere deep in the noise, the truth had cracked the surface. Murphy didn't sit back this time. He leaned in, elbows on the desk, eyes locked on Musk like a surgeon preparing for a cut. You call this truth, he said. But what you're really doing is giving people permission to destroy each other. You stripped away the filters, the rules, the moderators, and now you want applause for the wreckage. Musk listened. No reaction. Just stillness. Murphy pressed on. This isn't about ideas anymore. It's about impact. And the impact of X is measurable. Misinformation, violence, trauma. You didn't build a mirror. You built a stage. And now you're pretending you're not directing the play. Musk finally moved. He leaned forward slowly, his voice quiet but full of weight. Senator, I understand that you're angry. I would be too if I thought I could engineer safety and found out I couldn't. But that's the problem, isn't it? He paused, just enough to let the silence work. You're not trying to protect people from speech. You're trying to protect them from thinking things you can't predict. Murphy's jaw twitched. I'm trying to stop people from dying. And I'm trying to stop society from forgetting how to think without being told what's safe, Musk replied. It was no longer debate. It was ideology colliding at full speed. Murphy shot back. You keep pretending this is noble, but this isn't philosophy class. You run the algorithm, you push the buttons, and people pay the price. Musk met his tone. I adjust the algorithm, yes. To reduce manipulation, not to choose the right voices. That's what scares you. The fact that I'm not curating the narrative for your side, or any side. Murphy raised a sheet from the folder, visibly frustrated. So you're just... what? A neutral god watching chaos from above? Musk almost smiled. No, just a guy who thinks permission to speak shouldn't depend on politics. A visible shift moved through the room. Reporters scribbled faster. Phones tilted higher. The committee chair leaned in but didn't interrupt. Murphy stared at Musk for a beat, then coldly. Maybe what you really want isn't a platform, Mr. Musk. Maybe what you want is permission to never be wrong. Musk didn't fire back immediately. He just looked at him and said, plainly, I don't need to be right, Senator. I just need to be allowed to speak. Boom, the first real silence that hurt. The chairman finally spoke, but his gavel barely echoed, because the real noise had already happened, and it hadn't come from his desk. This committee will now take a 10-minute recess. But no one moved. Chris Murphy was still seated, fingers tight around the last page in his folder, as if letting go might mean surrender. Across from him, Elon Musk leaned back in his chair. Not smug at all. Just still, like someone who had walked into a storm and refused to close his umbrella. Outside the chamber, the world wasn't silent. Twitter, X was on fire. Musk says permission to speak shouldn't depend on politics. Murphy, You want a stage, not a society. Free speech just became war speech. Cable news anchors were already spinning. On MSNBC, a panel called Musk's testimony dangerously naive. On Fox, he was a reluctant truth-teller cornered by the machine. Clips were everywhere, cut, captioned, reposted with music. A TikTok had already stitched Musk's line, "I don't need to be right, I just need to be allowed to speak." Over a cinematic slow zoom of him at the mic, the caption read, "He didn't argue, he endured." But back in the chamber, there was no music, just air. Heavy and full of things left unsaid. Murphy stood first. He didn't speak again. He just collected his papers one by one, slowly, like each sheet was a part of something he couldn't quite finish. A staffer whispered something in his ear. He didn't answer. He looked at Musk one last time, not with rage, not even disdain, just weariness, the kind of exhaustion that only comes from realizing you didn't lose the argument. You lost control of the room. Musk didn't smile. He didn't stand. He just watched Murphy leave. Then, for the first time that morning, he took a sip of his water. It wasn't for show. It was because the conversation was over, and the silence that followed felt permanent. Outside, the world was shouting, but inside, one idea was still echoing. Truth doesn't win by screaming. It wins by whispering. Later that evening, the sun was fading over Washington. The marble steps of the Capitol were nearly empty, save for a few staffers and tourists lingering for one last photo. But behind closed doors, the real conversations had just begun. Elon Musk sat in a small, windowless office on the third floor, one of those backroom briefing spaces not meant for headlines, only handshakes. Across from him sat Senator Rachel Devlin, an independent from Oregon. Not a fire starter, not a headline grabber. She was known for listening. No cameras, no aides, just 2 glasses of iced tea, a legal pad, and a room thick with what hadn't been said in public. "That was intense," Devlin said, breaking the silence first. Musk didn't nod. He didn't even shift. It usually is when someone tries to define reality with a stopwatch and a soundbite. Devlin gave a faint smile. "You know you rattled them, right?" "I wasn't trying to," Musk said. "I was trying to remind them that the world doesn't work in curated bullet points." She leaned back. "So, what does it work on?" He looked up, slowly, deliberately. "Friction," he said. "Clashing ideas, messy conversations, discomfort. All the stuff algorithms are designed to avoid." Devlin wrote something on her pad. "You don't sound like a CEO." "I'm not," Musk replied. "I just run companies so I can protect the one thing nobody else is building anymore, places where people can say the wrong thing and not be exiled for it." There was a pause. Not awkward, earned. Devlin finally asked the question no one else had. "Do you think people can really handle the truth?" Musk's answer was almost a whisper. "No, but I think they deserve the chance to try." A moment passed. No applause, no viral clip, just 2 people sitting in the quiet that comes after the storm, where real change always begins. Because sometimes the loudest sound in politics isn't outrage, it's someone refusing to flinch. The next morning, headlines were everywhere. Musk versus Murphy. Who really won the hearing? Free speech or free collapse? The quiet power play that froze the Senate room. Cable panels argued. Podcasts dissected. Social media imploded. Clips were spliced, context shredded, and reshaped for every agenda imaginable. But Elon Musk wasn't watching. He was walking down the back corridor of the Capitol building, flanked only by the quiet hum of old air vents and the light buzz of a staffer's radio in a nearby room. No press, no cameras, no urgency. Just a man moving through the aftermath like he'd been here before. Like this wasn't the peak of something, but just the latest chapter in a longer story no one else had the patience to read. A janitor passed him in the hall, pushing a trash bin. For a moment she paused, recognizing him, not with awe, just curiosity. Musk gave her a nod. She nodded back, nothing more. But that moment said everything the hearings couldn't. No stage, no script, just reality. Outside, a group of college students gathered by the barricades. Some held signs. One read, "Censorship is not safety." Another, "We don't trust curated truth." But the one that caught Musk's eye was handwritten, crooked, and held high by a kid who couldn't have been older than 19. "Let us think." He stopped for a second. Just one, and nodded. Not at the kid, not at the sign, but at the idea. Because that was the thing no one could censor, not algorithms, not politics, not hearings, not outrage. An idea. He stepped into the waiting car without a word. No post, no press statement, just silence. But not empty silence. The kind of silence that lingers after someone finally says something true. And as the Capitol faded behind him, so did the noise, but not the echo. Because truth, real truth, doesn't need to trend. It just needs to be heard once, by someone who never forgets it.